This happened back in 2005. My ex and I were still together at this point, and we had an apartment in a 6-unit building. We were on the 2nd floor, only one door to enter or leave. I promise this is relevant. One afternoon, my then husband wanted to go over to the university campus to hang out at the library and check email and such, and he asked if I wanted to come with him. I said no. I had a paper I had to write for a class and needed to go get that done. He left and I started getting settled in to do some writing when I hear the door open and shut again, and I thought he'd forgotten something and had come back, as he was gone only a handful of minutes. I had my back to the door, so I just assumed it was him. I asked, "That was the shortest trek to campus and back? Everything okay?" I didn't get an answer, so I turned around, and it wasn't my partner standing there, but the neighbor who lived across the hall from us, standing in front of my door, the only means of escape I had. We live on the 2nd floor, and I'm not about to go jump out of a window should he try to tackle me. I'm only 5'2.5", and this guy is easily 6'3", and no slouch. In other words, he could have taken me down pretty easily. I snapped at him. "What do you think you're doing in my apartment, Jasper?" This guy has a serious schizoaffective disorder that requires heavy-duty medication. He'd been off his meds for some time, and our landlord cared for him. When it was time for his monthly shot, he'd disappear for a while, thinking he'd avoid getting the dose. All he said to me was, "I just want a cigarette." My partner was a smoker more than I was, but I wasn't going to pilfer his smokes to give this guy anything. I just wanted him gone. He was fairly harmless for the most part, but he made me quite nervous, because he is known for busting out all of his windows out of his apartment in a psychotic rage one night, and subsequently did the same with the neighbors below him. So, you can understand why I didn't want to engage him. I snapped at him that he needed to leave or I was calling the landlord. He repeated himself again, and I told him as I was reaching for the phone, "I'm going to ring the landlord if you don't get the fuck out of my apartment." He took off and we didn't see much of him after that. Ever since that afternoon, I keep my door locked at all times unless I know someone's on their way over and will be here shortly so they can just come on in, but they also know to announce themselves. I ended up moving out of that apartment as soon as I could. When I was 4, my parents got a divorce. My mom had moved into a 3-house apartment complex after all was said and done. We lived in the apartment. It was a nice, quiet neighborhood, and I had become best friends with the boy who lived behind us. We will call him Jack. One day while I was at my mom's, I asked if I could go outside and play around the yard and driveway area. There wasn't too much of a yard, but it was enough for 4-year-old me who just wanted to go exploring and play in the dirt. As I was roaming around the little apartment complex, I came across a cat sitting in the basement window of the apartment on the right of us. I kneel down near the window and start talking to the kitty, 'cause I'm 4 and it's a pet. Out of nowhere, my neighbor's son, let's note that his neighbor's son is probably in his 20s, pops his head in the window. He asks, "Do you want to pet the cat?" I say, "Yes." He then proceeds to say, "If you want to pet it, you'll have to come inside." Of course, I oblige, because I want to pet the cat. I'm 4, and I don't know any better, and I'm thinking this is my neighbor, so he must be nice. I'm not sure if I blocked this part out of my memory, or if I blacked out, but the next thing I remember is being completely naked, lying on my stomach, with socks stuffed in my mouth. I honestly don't remember if he touched me or not. Regardless, it's clear those were his intentions. His parents started to call for him from upstairs. He then told me to hide behind a sheet that was covering a mattress that was against the wall. So, I did. I stood there, completely naked, waiting for this guy to return. While I am waiting, I can hear my mom calling me to come home. This is when I started to panic. He returned a few minutes later, but what felt like an eternity. I begged for him to let me go home, and that I could hear my mother calling for me. Surprisingly, he let me get dressed and run home. Once I arrived home, my mother was furious with me for making her worry about where I was. So I lied, and I said I was at Jack's. Why did I lie to her? I don't know. I was scared, confused, processing. My mother also kind of scared me as a child, but that's a story for another time. Eventually, I did confess what happened to my dad, about maybe a week later. I remember going to the police station multiple times. Every time I had to talk to the police, I would scream and cry, while my dad would hold me in his arms, trying to calm me down. Can you just imagine being 4 years old and having to continuously relive this over and over again? It felt like torture. I guess I couldn't do it anymore. So, yet again, I lied and said I made it up or some shit like that. How a 4-year-old has that kind of an imagination is beyond me, but I highly doubt a little girl could make up such a story like this. But I could be wrong. No one believed me. The police never looked into it any further, as far as I know. This guy got away with it. Who knows if he's done something like this to someone else? Knowing that makes me feel like I could have done more. Fought for myself harder. To top it all off, my mother made me go knock on their door and personally apologize to him and his family. So fucked up, right? To this day, I don't know who or where he is, or if he ever got caught doing this to someone else. I pray he never does do this again to anyone else, and that I was his only victim.